Hey, 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 hey! What's up, people? It is the Week 12 edition of Wake and Rake. Welcome in for the next 60 minutes or thereabouts. My guy, Justin Fensterman from SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio and FantasyAlarm.com, and me, Ben Heisler. We will be going through the matchups. We will be answering all of your daily fantasy questions, your season-long fantasy questions, helping you get ready for a very important Week 12 in the National Football League. Fensty, how you doing this morning, man? You look busy. You look like you're sorting things out. You're getting all your information together.
I need to dominate this week, Ben. I have so many playoff spots on the line, and because of that, I needed to revive my old computer. That way, I could do more, make sure everything is set. Ben, I made so many mistakes this year in fantasy football. The things that you should not do, you might as well put on a shirt to raise awareness to others who are playing. I've fallen asleep 3 different times putting waiver claims in on Tuesday. Let's start there, okay? That's how bad of a season it's been for me.
Oh, well, listen, like, there's still opportunities to be able to bounce back, get things going again. Like, what's an example of a mistake that you've made that a lot of our other listeners and viewers have also made this year? Like, what can you do to try and learn from those mistakes?
Spending $78 on Ty Johnson, not only the most wasteful way to spend your budget for the season, but maybe in my life, first waiver acquisition I've ever had in any fantasy sports. $78 in our league, Ben, out of 100. Not ideal.
But that's not like you fell asleep. Like, you were clearly looking at a guy that we all thought was going to get the bulk of the carries after Carry-On went down, and we thought Detroit's a team that was going to be more ground and pound. And granted, Stafford was still playing at that point, but now the Driscoll's in. It's just made life much, much more difficult at this point.
And I didn't fall asleep making that bid, but making other bids, you got to make sure you hit the submit button, especially if you're playing on multiple sites. Ben, I've literally fallen asleep on my laptop, drooling on my laptop 3 different times this season. It's 10:30. I'm watching old episodes of WWE Tough Enough, and I'm putting it all in. I'm watching the NBA. I'm putting all the waiver claims in, and then
it's just that's it. That's it. Kaput. You're done.
Submit.
Oh my goodness! All right. Well, listen. There's plenty of us to be able to get to, including some news about George Kittle, and I already see some questions coming in from our usual fans, from Seth, from PD Dubs, from Mr. Sports Take. So all these questions we will make sure that we get to over the course of Wake and Rake this morning. George Kittle. Once again, Fensty, we were trying to find some information on him because we were seeing conflicting reports. This could be the 3rd consecutive game that the 49ers tight end misses today. If he does miss, what direction do we go in, especially with the 49ers going up against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers today?
I mean, we're seeing with other receiving options for the 49ers, Emmanuel Sanders, we're seeing that there's a shot that he'll play, so he's questionable. Looks like there's a better chance he plays than sits. Same with Deebo Samuel as well from the reports I've seen on the running back side. Matt Breida, doubtful there. So there are other options. So with Deebo Samuel being in, Ben, I'm going to be looking at once again.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly reasonable way to be able to go. And again, like the thing with the 49ers offense is that they're so run dependent. I think, they've run second most amount of plays after Baltimore this year in the NFL. But if there's anything that we saw from them, last week is that they're not going away from the tight end spot by any stretch of the imagination. They're still going to have a lot of creativity there. And I think once again, it's in play.
Right. But one of the things that I also realize is we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the Packers this season as well.
Well, let's get into them because there's a lot to talk about with them.
It's a 47.5 total on this game. So I'm thinking there are going to be points scored. I mean, the thing is, outside of Devontae Adams, though, who exactly can you trust from this receiving core? It's been so tough this year, Ben. And these were value receivers I loved going in. These are guys that you could get for $1 or $2 in your auctions, and you're like, great, Aaron Rodgers is throwing them the ball. Oh, Jimmy Graham, you're thinking more commitment to the tight end. And it just hasn't been anyone outside of Devontae Adams, and he's even been out. We haven't been able to get a good read on this receiving core.
I'm with you there, but I think what we've also seen is we've seen their running backs get involved in the passing game as well. And they've had a lot. They've shown Fensty a full commitment to it to be able to get the job done from that side of the ball. And I do think Aaron Rodgers is actually in a really nice spot. The 49ers defense is not the same super tough defense that we've seen over the last 3 weeks of the season. They're giving up points. I think they're averaging about 27 points per game. Their teams are starting to be able to take advantage of them in the passing game. I know Richard Sherman got off to a nice start. He's been getting cooked a little bit lately as well. They're still putting pressure on the quarterback. They still have 12 sacks in their last 3 weeks. They've still forced 5 fumbles. But they're not taking the ball away too, Fensty. Only 1 forced interception in the last 3 weeks.
No, right. And, here's the other thing. I mean, you're right. Both running backs could be in play. Jamal Williams on DraftKings, 4,500, coming off a poor Week 10, but beyond that, been very involved. And that's what happens when you can't come through from the receiving side of it. The more ground and pound, you can use Aaron Jones a little bit on that part for short dump-offs. But Jamal Williams could be a value option I could be going with today, Ben.
Before we start answering your questions, and lots of them are coming in right here over on Wake and Rake, whether you're watching on YouTube Live, whether you're watching on Periscope or Twitter with us, wherever you are watching us, we certainly appreciate you guys being with us today. Let's get into that Seattle-Philadelphia matchup today. This is one I think is an opportunity for Carson Wentz to really put himself back on track. And the problem is that I just don't know if a lot of people trust him to do that. Carson Wentz the last several weeks, if you try and figure out, like, if it wasn't Carson Wentz's name attached to it, we wouldn't be anywhere near this guy. 191 yards, 172 yards against Buffalo, 239 against Chicago. He's only thrown for 1 touchdown in 4 consecutive games. The numbers are not good right now for Carson Wentz, but if there is an opportunity for him to bounce back against Seattle at home, where Philadelphia is actually a 2-point favorite, are we looking at Carson Wentz in this spot and thinking, okay, if we're going to play him, especially with a good value on DraftKings this week, who are the guys that we want to surround him with? Because I know one guy that I really like.
Well, I'll tell you this. 2 guys that I squad. Alshon Jeffrey expected to play. Mm-hmm. So I feel like the ownership may be a little lighter on him because he's just coming back. Very questionable going into this week, Ben. Now expected to play, so I'm always watching him. Rather go with the receivers than Carson Wentz itself, but value speaks for itself. Somebody else that I've been looking at, only because he's been getting targeted a little more, Dallas Goedert. Mm-hmm. He's been scoring touchdowns more consistently, Ben. And again, a very cheap option that you could go with at tight end. 2 tight ends. Amount of those. Nelson Aguilar not expected to play in this game. I'm going to give Goddard a look in a couple of my lineups today. Well,
I'm glad you brought up Goddard because that's a guy that I'm really intrigued by for this week, and somebody that my buddy Derek Brown has wrote about in his 10 stats article over at the Quant Edge. So since week 3, Dallas Goedert has actually out-targeted Zach Ertz in the red zone, and Seattle is 23rd in DVOA against the tight end spot. So if you're looking for touchdown volume, Goddard is a great play because I think most people, if they're going to try and spend down this week at quarterback fence, they're going to look at somebody like Carson Wentz and say, okay, Carson Wentz, pair him up with Zach Ertz. There you go. That's my easy go-ahead and pairing for the day. But there's a couple other plays. You brought up Dallas Goedert, who I also like. What about Miles Sanders this week? Especially if they are dealing with a lot of the injuries that they're trying to figure out and whether or not Alshon Jeffrey is truly 100%. We're seeing more and more of Miles Sanders be incorporated into the passing game and starting to see more volume in this offense. And I don't know whether or not the status on Jordan Howard has been cleared at this point. I don't think he's playing. As far as I know, so yeah, I think
he's likely out.
Okay, so he's likely out. So I think once again, Miles Sanders in play this week at what around 5,100? He's at 5K this week on DraftKings.
Yeah, and I think that's fine, especially with Jordan Howard out. But was talking to NFL insider Adam Kaplan, who knows the Eagles very well, yesterday on Fantasy Sports Today on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. And one of the things he says is, though, once all 3 are healthy, to be very involved in this offense. For this particular week, Ben, knowing, let's say Jordan Howard's out of the way, with Ajayi now back in the mix and going to be hopefully getting more from that standpoint for his sake, do you worry about Sanders at all, or is the price just too good? You know he'll get some targets, and for 5K, it's not a big risk, especially if you're going with Wentz today.
I think at that price point, there's a couple guys that I really like. Notably Miles Sanders and notably Phillip Lindsay for Denver today against Buffalo, where Buffalo has actually struggled against the run this year. Also, the conditions of that game really set up a scenario in which they'll be running the ball quite a bit. So I think that's sort of my biggest challenge is if I'm looking for any sort of value at running back, there's just not much this week. Some people might be looking at Bo Scarborough at 4,200 against Washington. I don't know if I can pull the trigger on there, even in cash. I'd rather try and get to either Miles Sanders at 5K or Philip Lindsay at 5,200 because Fensty, certainly you want to try and get McCaffrey in if you can, but he's super expensive today. Alvin Kamara is going to be in every lineup for me today, regardless. Cash, GPP, it's just the matchup is so ideal for him. Just because Carolina cannot stop the run by any stretch of the imagination. And they also struggle against pass-catching running backs, too. So I got to find a way to get some sort of value at the position today, whether it be at running back or whether it be at wide receiver.
Let me ask you this, Ben. Who would you rather build your lineup around from the run game? Nick Kamara. That's a very tough decision we're all going to have to make.
I'll tell you right now, I'd rather play Kamara.
Okay. Me too. Again, you have to look at the Browns facing the Dolphins. I need value somewhere. And when looking at that game, if you're not going to put Nick Chubb in there, Odell Beckham Jr. has what should be a cake matchup. Baker Mayfield playing better. But here's someone that I normally like, Ben. He might be priced up too much for me in that game. Jarvis Landry, 300. That's not the cheapest value anymore, Ben.
No, and what was nice about Jarvis Landry over the last several weeks was you could get good value on him, and he was completely out-targeting Odell Beckham by a wide margin. This week, especially, Baker Mayfield's going to be a popular cash game quarterback. And again, I know a lot of you guys have questions. A bunch of them are coming in. We will get to all of them coming up in just a second. So if you have submitted a question, we promise we will make sure we get to them here on Wake and Rake early this morning. There's a $700 price difference between Landry and Beckham. And to me, I think Beckham is worth the risk this week against Miami, where they have just been completely torched by deep wide receivers all year. I still think Julio is a safer play. I still think Mike Evans is a safer play. But it's hard for me to play Baker and not have Odell Beckham in that lineup as well.
Would you say Lockett is considered a safe play? I mean, the ownership on him, I can only imagine, is going to be very high.
No, not coming off the injury, though.
Okay. So
at least for me.
I mean, it's a good right. I mean, you got to ask about this question. It's a great matchup for him. So it's, again, we've attacked the Eagles secondary all season long. Absolutely. You ready to get to some questions, Fensty? Always. All right, let's start with our buddy PD Dubs, who checks it on YouTube Live. This is full point PPR, Michael Gallup, Robert Woods, or Alshon Jeffrey. So I'm probably staying away from Gallup. I really don't want a whole lot of exposure, Fensty, to anybody from that New England-Dallas game. That's a game that I think is going to be sloppy and wet and rainy, and especially with Amari Cooper dealing with that knee injury, that usually is a negative correlation when he's off the field for Michael Gallup, so I don't think I want to do anything there. And then you are dealing with Robert Woods against a tough matchup against Baltimore. Alshon Jeffrey is the best matchup out of all those guys. Do you trust him coming back today if they do rule him healthy to be the best lineup play out of all three of those guys? It's going to have to be that way because Robert Woods is still very questionable. Personal reasons have kept him out, and he's not a lock to play today, Ben. So with that, thinking of it from that standpoint, you might just have to force yourself to go with Jeffrey because of it as soon as we get that final confirmation that he's playing. I think that's probably the way to go as well. I'm leaning towards Jeffrey, and it's weird because, again, he's a guy that typically I don't trust most weeks, but I like the matchup certainly more. If I had to choose somebody purely based on volume, I suppose I'd go with Robert Woods, but I think Jeffrey is probably the slightly stronger play this week, which is weird. It's normally that's just doesn't really go together. Yeah. Right. We just don't know if Woods is playing, and that's the big problem right there with that being later in the afternoon. From Seth over on Periscope Live, always good to hear from our buddy Seth. He's got a flex spot question and a half-point PPR. Fensty, do we go with Devin Singletary, Terry McLaurin, or Cortland Sutton today? So Singletary is going up against the Broncos. Terry McLaurin is at home for Washington against Detroit in a very ideal matchup, but we'll see whether or not his quarterback is willing to give him the football. Or Cortland Sutton. Sutton's a really interesting play for me, Fensty, and again, a guy that I really liked before as a contrarian play. I thought at 6,200 this week on DraftKings, I thought that he was a great guy to be able to go ahead and go to, especially with everybody likely going towards the likes of DJ Chark and Calvin Ridley and Amari Cooper.
Devontae Adams is only 6,500 this week. So I looked at Cortland Sutton based on his target share, Fensty, and thought to myself, this is a guy that's getting a ton of volume. Tre'Davious White hasn't been as good as advertised the last few weeks. Like, I really liked him this week, and now I'm seeing reports from Roto Grinders as far as the weather is concerned that it's going to be super windy, and Buffalo is just not an ideal spot today to be able to pass the football. So maybe does that take it?
Ben, we should bring this up now. There are a lot of weather issues on the East Coast. So for those that are, especially for daily, putting that shot into East Coast games, remember, it's really not looking good across the board. As someone who's on the East Coast himself, the sun is just peeking out now. But I can tell you this, that's a big thing for is weather in a lot of these East Coast games.
Yeah, the Denver at Buffalo, this is from Kevin Roth over at Roto Grinders, that it's going to be wind gusts of about 20 to 25 miles per hour. Temperatures are going to be cold, but around 40 degrees. He thinks it's warranted enough to bump down the passing game and the kicking game. Washington is going to have about 15 miles per hour sustained winds. With the game against the New York Jets and Oakland Raiders, there could be some rain early, also 15 to 20 mile per hour winds. Seattle and Philadelphia might have a little bit of wind, but that's only 10 to 15 miles per hour. And then New England is probably going to be the worst of all of it today. I think if you want to go ahead and try to avoid some of those games, I completely understand it. Maybe that's another reason, like in that Seattle-Philadelphia game, to go back to Miles Sanders, because short dump-off passes, not dealing with the wind, maybe that could be certainly intriguing. And, I looked at that total thinking to myself, that's going to clear 48 easily. But maybe that's sort of the right total at this point.
Well, let me ask you this. Broncos-Bills, this is something I was thinking about. 37. I think they could still clear that.
As far as the under goes?
No, the game total in terms of the over.
Oh, as far as the over. Yeah, they could, but I mean, the weather hasn't impacted the line in that game. It's been 37 and a half all week. So I don't know whether that's an indication there. But to answer the question for Seth, I'm probably going Singletary here against Denver. McLaren, I worry about the weather. I worry about Dwayne Haskins getting him the ball. Cortland Sutton, I worry about the weather. I feel like the safest play of all those guys is Devin Singletary.
Right, as much as I really want to go Sutton, again, looking at those targets, I mean, at least 8 in 3 of his last 4 weeks, but look, with the weather concerns, especially being in the air, we're going to have to play it safe with Singletary. All
right, Seth, good luck to you. Mr. Sports Take checks in on our Twitter and Periscope feed. A guy that we mentioned before, Alshon Jeffrey, or do you go with Sterling Shepard? Shepard is in Chicago in a PPR game. No real weather indications coming out of Chicago so far. But Shepard is also coming back, Fensty, from the head injury where he's missed several games. But Daniel Jones he's been pretty good from at the fantasy level this year. So where are you going in this matchup?
Man, I think I'm still sticking with Jeffrey only because I really want to attack Seattle in this game. In this one, market share is going to look like it's his first game back, and now Golden Tate is in as well. So with that, I'm just unsure how targets will be divided. I'm going to stick with Alshon Jeffrey there.
I think a slight edge to Alshon Jeffrey, although Shepard normally is a better style player for PPR. But again, it's also against a tougher defense. Bears have had their issues. But I feel like they should probably... This seems like one of those games where the Bears will find a way to win comfortably, even if Mitch Trubisky ends up going like 18 of 28 for 173 yards and maybe a couple touchdowns. It's just the Giants' defense is so bad. They're so bad, Fensty. And at least to Mitch Trubisky's credit, and there's not much to be given this year, in their 2 games against just dog shit teams, he's thrown for 3 touchdowns against Washington. He's also thrown for 3 touchdowns against Detroit. So, again, it's not saying much, but I think this is another squad against the Giants where he can probably have another nice game.
Right. And you know what? I'm in a few season-long leagues. I mean, Darius Slayton does indeed scare me a little bit, not just because of the targets last week, but again, now with Tate back in, that's just another mouth to feed, and you know that Saquon will also be fed some targets as well.
No doubt. I see questions coming in from Varun, from our buddy Corey in Winnipeg, Jay Mathis 25. Jared checks in on Periscope. I see a question from Paul. Controversial is another one. Abo 21. So we'll get to all you guys coming up here on Wake and Rake. But let's go and continue on. Here's an interesting question from our buddy Sizzle who checks in. Sit 1 Fensty, half-point PPR. One got to go between Cortland Sutton, Calvin Ridley, and Odell Beckham Jr. I think for me,
wow.
Again, like I love the matchup too much for Ridley to be able to sit him. I think this is, if you're going to play Odell, this is the week to play him. I think you probably got to bench Sutton once again, even though the target volume has been so good.
Yeah, it's a good situation to be in.
No doubt.
Benching Sutton. And I'll say this, I'm that confident in Calvin Ridley that if he doesn't produce, I'm taking yet another pie to the face, Ben Heisler. So I need Calvin Ridley. I picked him third in our pie draft because of that reason. I'm attacking that Tampa matchup. And yes, Calvin Ridley and Julio are in smash spots today.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought that up because I've been dealing and trying to figure out a cash game lineup this week over on DraftKings where I'm trying to figure out, okay, I have one that I think I like a little bit with Ridley in it because I couldn't get up to Julio. So, do you feel like if you're not playing Julio in cash, you're doing it wrong this week?
No, I honestly think that both, as much as I like both of them, I'm more going with a cheaper option with Ridley. So I think as long as you have at least one, you're fine.
Okay, so you just want exposure to it in some way, shape, or form. The problem about Matt Ryan is that he's in such a good matchup and he's at home, but for a guy that doesn't run, that's the second most expensive quarterback on the slate. I just can't bring myself to do it. In fact, I think according to the main slate, he is the second most expensive option behind Russell Wilson at 6,800. So I'd love to be able to play Matt Ryan today. I just don't. I can't find a way to be able to get there.
No, but it's, you know what, then here's what you do. Then you pivot and go to his receiver and again, 6,500 is a very fair price point. We were just talking about Landry, whether or not he's priced up too much matchup at 63. 65 for Ridley, he will be in every one of my lineups.
By the way, I have to give Fensty some credit last week. We did a head-to-head against each other in DraftKings, and he whooped my butt. It was a nice dominant victory for you. We will. I would imagine we will do it again today if you are interested. But I'm going to get my revenge on you today. I just got to figure out where I want to go, and I don't know if I'm going to go contrarian against you or if I'm going to use my cash game lineup. But we'll make sure this happens today.
Well, listen, if you want to go double or nothing, I'm right here, Ben. Just bring it.
Okay, there we go. By the way, you guys can always find us if you want to do and play a head-to-head with us on DraftKings. What is your DK handle, Fensty?
That is going to be Fensty.
Just Fensty. Yeah, and then me, you can find me at Benny Heis if anyone wants to play us in a head-to-head. I'm not doing more than $20 right now against you guys. Fensty might do that full $50 or $100 or that big money. I don't know, but just keep it light for now. I've been struggling.
If my winnings off of you, Ben Heisler, then it will be no problem because I keep whooping your butt, and then I'll have free entry fees for the larger contest right there.
All right.
Money.
All right. Well, I immediately regret going over this decision on air, but so be it. Let's go back. Seth's got another question. Running back spot with Cook on a bye. Half-point PPR between Darius Geis, Miles Sanders, or Brian Hill. I'm avoiding Brian Hill this week, Fensty, only in the sense that the Falcons are going up against the Bucs, and what the Bucs do well is stop the run. So that's not an ideal matchup for me. I know the Lions are atrocious against the run, but I think I'd still rather have the only way I'd go with Geis over Sanders is if it was a standard league. But half-point PPR, I think I'd rather have the exposure to Miles Sanders.
Yeah, and knowing that Adrian Peterson would be out would make me more for DFS. I like his value today. Chris Thompson not expected to play, but Peterson still is expected to play. So with that, let's go with Miles Sanders here. Less competition in the backfield, even though I am worried long term. And when I say long term, I mean the next 3 to 4 weeks about Jay Ajayi's involvement. But today, we're going to go Sanders.
From Varun checking in on YouTube Live today, PPR, pick one between Jeff Driscoll, Sam Darnold, or Nick Foles. Oof. I will say that Jeff, they all have pretty good matchups today. Darnold is at home against the Raiders. Nick Foles is on the road against Tennessee. Jeff Driscoll is on the road against Washington. I think Foles is probably the play for me because I know he's going to take some deep shots. Tennessee's been fairly good at stopping the run, so another concerning matchup once again for Leonard Fournette. At some point, that positive touchdown regression is going to come. I just don't know if it happens this week. And I like Nick Foles' receivers. Like, I really do. Like, I think DJ Chark's a really good play. I think D.D. Westbrook is a solid in-between slot guy that's going to be able to extend plays. I think Chris Conley's turned himself into a nice big play wide receiver that can stretch the defense for him. Like, I think Nick Foles is firmly in play this week.
I mean, it's the safest of the options, in my opinion. I'll say this, Josh Norman being out for the Redskins does make me want to get some exposure to that Lions offense. And we were just talking about this, the Jets-Raiders, there are going to be points in that game, Ben. There are going to be points in that game, and Crowder's going to be fed a lot. So, safety standpoint, it is going to be Nick Foles. But again, if I'm chasing the points, if I'm in a spot where I need a boom or bust, then I'm going Sam Darnold there.
Okay, fair enough.
For that matter.
Fair enough. I think that's a perfectly reasonable spot. Let's continue on. Seth has another question. I'm sorry, we already got to him. From PD Dubs, full point PPR between Greg Olsen or Dallas Goedert today. Goddard, again, I like him more as a guy that has the ability to go and get a touchdown, but Greg Olsen continues to see volume, and I think if you're going to attack the Saints on the road in the middle of the field, Olsen, it's not like he has the best burst anymore, but I feel like that's probably the ideal spot to be able to do it. He's got, 21 targets in his last 3 games. Doesn't have a touchdown since the 22nd of September when he had 2. But I certainly think Kyle Allen could have a bounce-back game, especially if he finds Greg Olsen, especially if Christian McCaffrey can make a big play happen. He's not going to look as bad as he did last week, and I know the Saints' defense is very good.
From watching the Panthers, where I'm seeing Olsen get open, and I think I mentioned this about Cole Beasley a few weeks ago, just seeing him be wide open just in the middle of the field as almost like a bailout option. And in basketball, I talk about bailout shooters, guys who just camp out at the arc. The defense collapses, he's open at the arc. In this situation, as the play is ending and it's being extended, I start to see Olsen all of a sudden open in the middle of the field. Nobody on him. So 15-yard strike or not, you're still getting that PPR bonus right there. So with that, Olsen being open in the middle of the field, I'm totally down with Olsen still in this matchup.
All right, so we'll go with Olsen there. PD Dubs, good luck to you. From Corey in Winnipeg, he wants to know which Giants receivers could have a breakout game against the Bears. So you have Sterling Shepard coming back, Golden Tate is in line in the middle of the field, and then you have, who am I missing? Darius Slayton on the outside. So of those 3 guys, is there anybody in particular that you like more?
It's hard, Ben, because of the return of Sterling Shepard. I want to give Darius Slayton a shot still, but I can't still with Shepard there. So with that, I'm going to go to the slot, and I'm going to go with Golden Tate there being the safest of the 3 options.
I think that's the right play. Tate continues to see just enormous volume in this offense. Daniel Jones clearly has found a connection with him. And I'll be honest, I was wrong about Golden Tate. Maybe I talked about this last week, so if I did, feel free to let me know and we can move on. But, the target share has just been utterly insane since October the 10th. 9, 11, 10, 6, 8 targets. He says 3 touchdowns in 5 games this year. He's just been super reliable for a Giants team that's been anything but reliable. So I think in this particular spot, Golden Tate, not only the safest play, but maybe also the highest upside play as well.
Right, and it was good timing with him because he was suspended for the first few games, so teams didn't have any tape on him and how he was going to operate Giants offense. And as soon as he comes back, that's when other members of the Giants like Saquon, Sterling Shepard, everyone got hurt. Evan Engram, who's not playing,
right.
Ellison, who's not playing today. So with that, Tate came in. It was right place, right time for him. That's why it makes it so hard that now Shepard, who they're going to want to target, is getting back into this game because you see somewhat of a rapport with Slayton and Daniel Jones. And now with Shepard back, and it just makes things that much more confusing. So we got to go with the constant.
I think that's the right play. I think that's perfectly fair. Continuing on, we got about another 30 minutes left for you guys today here on Wake and Rake, so make sure you guys join us each and every Sunday. With the exception of next Sunday, I think we're going to have a slightly different show in light of me traveling on the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Fensty, I know you got some shows at SiriusXM that day as well, so we will let you know via social media when we're going to be on if it is not at our normally scheduled time. So make sure you guys are following us at Benny Heis, at Fensty Sports, to make sure you find out when you can ask your questions live with us for Thanksgiving week. We might even do Maybe we might even do a quick little show together, Fensty, breaking down the Thanksgiving slate. If we're able to figure out the timing for that this week. From JMathis25 on Twitter this week, standard scoring, we've got to start one between Sterling Shepard, Deontay Johnson of Pittsburgh, and Chris Conley. If it's standard scoring, Fensty, if we're looking for guys that can get into the end zone, do we dare roll the dice with Chris Conley this week? Because I love that matchup for him.
Yes, but Deontay Johnson doesn't have Juju Smith-Schuster to deal with, Ben. I need a Steelers option in this game against Cincinnati, whether it's Deontay Johnson or Vance McDonald. I need one of those two in my lineups. I'm thinking they're set to get more targets. That's the one problem. Deontay Johnson had been dealing with a concussion. He's cleared. He should be able to play, no problem. So he's going to be walking into a lot of who's it going to be? Johnny Holton again?
I mean, listen, if that's an ideal spot to be in. Shepard's probably going to see a bunch of targets as well, but again, like the targets don't really matter that much in PPR. I think Deontay's down. Yeah, that probably makes sense. Although I just know that Conley has a nose for the end zone and big plays, and those are things that matter more so in standard leagues.
Yep, no, you're right. And you know what, Ben? I'll say this from this show: you seem to be really on the. And I actually had not really given them that much thought going into the slate. You're starting to make me turn my head a little bit with this Jaguars team. What are your expectations in this game? Again, 41.5 against Tennessee. You're in on this, Ben Heisler.
I think I am, and I think what's nice about having exposure is that they're one of the two late games. Because if you're looking for a flex option, I think Derrick Henry is a great play this week. Derrick Henry against Jacksonville's defense is a really strong play. If you want guys to run it back with on the other side, it just gives you a little bit of leverage to be able to change to. If your early options, if all your East Coast stacks end up just getting crushed because of the weather or just because of the inconsistent play, it at least gives you a little bit of leverage on the back end to be able to change. So I'm probably going to have Derrick Henry in a bunch of my lineups this week in the flex, assuming that I can't find another good running back. And then I think, if somebody like Chris Conley maybe or Chark or maybe have Foles in one lineup in tournaments this week. There's some intriguing plays there, Fence. I wouldn't go nuts. And again, I don't want a lot of exposure to New England and Dallas. I think that's just going to be a slow game that's probably going to be run dominated today with a lot of the weather. So I think that Jags Tennessee game is a chance to score some points.
Would going nuts be putting Leonard Fournette in your lineup from that game?
No.
Looking at the previous game, he did have 6 receptions in that game, one of his better game pass catcher, and also 66 rushing yards. Did not score from what I'm seeing in that game, but still, just again, if you want part of this game, 7,300, a lot of people are going to be on those high-end running backs. There's a value option for you.
No doubt.
Henry, great call by you. Great spot.
Yeah, Derrick Henry is not going to be a ton of money this week. He's only, 6,900? In this matchup, so yeah. I think he's sitting in a really good spot. We'll see ultimately how it ends up going down, but I think Derrick Henry is a great play this week against Jacksonville. Let's continue on with our questions coming in from you guys on YouTube Live, on Periscope, on Twitter, on Facebook as well. Let's see, from Paul, he's got 2 questions for us. A flex spot between Josh Gordon and Jamal Williams, and then he also has a defensive question. So let's start there. Josh Gordon, we were looking for guys, Fensty, to run it back with on the Seattle side today. Josh Gordon's only 4,200 on DraftKings, but he's still in a lot of people's season-long lineups. Do you like him or Jamal Williams going up on the road against San Francisco today?
I mean, don't you think, man, I feel like the higher upside, and I hate using the word upside when talking fantasy sports, everyone does it. I feel like the higher upside play, though, for today in this game would have to be Josh Gordon, even though he's going to be sharing when it comes to a lot of targets. With Jamal Williams, Ben, does he have a safer floor in this matchup? That's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
I guess, his usage would indicate that he probably does. But again, it's San Francisco. I have concerns about trying to run on them. I really do. And I know that Kenyon Drake was able to do it a few weeks back, but it's Jamal Williams last week played 34 out of 68 snaps. Did not catch a pass, but the previous weeks he had caught 13 passes in 3 weeks. He had 4 touchdowns in the receiving game the last 4 weeks up until last week. So I think he's still probably the safer play, Fensty. But I do think Josh Gordon is going to see volume in a game that I expect to be pretty back and forth between Philadelphia and Seattle today.
I'm fine with chasing as well, Ben. Again, this is playoff time. You need the points, and safety is not always the best option in that regard. So, again, in a great matchup, we've been attacking that Eagles secondary all season long. Why not give them a shot?
From Controversial on YouTube wants to know with Jacob Hollister or Jared Cook in a full-point PPR. We got our first tight end debate of the day, Fensty. So Jacob Hollister, once again, is going up against Philadelphia in their secondary. Hollister, before the bye week, was just on fire for Seattle. Russell Wilson was finding a bunch of ways to get him the football. He had 12 catches on 16 targets, over 100 yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. Seattle has found a way to really make some magic out of the tight end spot this year. So I think he's certainly in play. But then Jared Cook has a great matchup against Carolina at home. I know that he wasn't the consistent option that maybe a lot of people were hoping for out of Jared Cook last week. Only 2 targets, 2 catches, but he did get himself into the end zone. So I think in this spot, I'm probably going Hollister just because I never really know what to expect out of Jared Cook on a week-in, week-out basis.
The inconsistent targets is just so frustrating. And by the way, he was coming back to an Oakland team that targeted him so much in the red zone last year. So we all thought we were getting him in another good spot here in New Orleans. But you know what? We're going to end up going with Hollister here again, chasing down that Eagles matchup. The targets are just too inconsistent, as you brought up, Ben. 3-10-2. I don't like that.
Yeah, I think that's totally the way to go there as well. Another one from Paul, the defensive question. Paul, I'm sorry I missed that on the back end. Atlanta or Detroit, which is pretty crazy to think about, Fensty. Like, when was the last time we were trying to debate between the Falcons defense or the Lions defense in an actual matchup for 2019 because of how bad they've been? But here we are. Falcons defense really starting to turn things around, and the Lions have a solid matchup against Washington on the road.
Man, you know what? It's just they're different now than what they were at the beginning of the season. All of a sudden, the Falcons, the Lions, I just confidence in them overall. I mean, we've tried going with other defenses against the Redskins before. It hasn't worked out as well. I really want to ride the Falcons wave at this point, Ben.
All right. Somebody brought up a question on Twitter that I wanted to make sure I got to today. Wanted to know who you preferred between Jimmy Garoppolo and Aaron Rodgers today. And I went with Rodgers. I like the fact that he's returning to the Bay Area. I think that the 49ers are going to try and run against Green Bay. That's sort of been an area of concern for the Packers all season long. I think Green Bay's actually had a fairly decent pass defense. I could see Rodgers and Davante Adams having themselves a nice game. And I also wonder, too, Fensty, whether or not that matchup is conducive to, a nice little Rodgers-Davante Adams stack this week as well.
No, very good. And the price point is good on Davante Adams as well. You know, what's keeping that price not getting into the end zone. So that actually benefits all of us fantasy players. I like Rodgers better than Jimmy Garoppolo here also because of the injury factor on the 49ers. It scares me just a little bit. I don't know who's in and who's out. So at this point, I feel like I got to be safe and go Rodgers.
Yeah, and again, the primetime matchup, Rodgers has usually put up really solid numbers in those games. I really like him tonight, and I think, if you're playing Showdown, he's probably at the top of your spot at captain. He'll be expensive, but I think, he's probably a play that, not a lot of people are going to want to spend up for because of all the different playmakers on this team, and I think he's in a really good spot. From Controversial again on YouTube, Fensty, Tyrell Williams against the New York Jets or Alshon Jeffrey in a full-point PPR. I know we've gone with Jeffrey for the bulk of the show today, but the matchup for Tyrell Williams is spectacular today. Against the Jets cornerback situation, they've been hurt, they've been bad all year. They get crushed in the deep ball. I mean, this feels like sort of a dream spot for Tyrell Williams, don't you think?
I mean, you would think. I just want to make sure those targets are there, Ben. I don't like seeing 4 targets for this guy. Who does he have to compete with at this point?
But that's been him all. That's been him all year. That's been him all year, though, and he still gives you numbers.
Right. It's because of the yardage. I mean, over the last few weeks, hasn't been that great. I mean, I was expecting a little bit more against Cincinnati as well.
Fair. That's fair.
I'm still, again, I like a lot of points being scored in this Jets-Raiders game. I'm going to go with him.
Okay, you bring up this game as you think there's going to be more points than a lot of us would anticipate. Would you do a game stack of this game in tournaments?
Yes, I would. You know what? If I'm going to put, let's just say, Josh Jacobs in, then I'm going to run it back with, on the other side, Crowder or even Robbie Anderson. Let's get him involved. By the way, I'll say this as well. Ryan, who has had productive weeks, the Jets just extended him. 3-year contract. So he's going to be involved as well, with no Herndon to take those targets.
Do you have any concern about the Jets' run defense against Josh Jacobs? Because I do. I don't know. I don't know if I can get to that price point with him.
It's hard. I do have slight concerns. Again, I'd rather attack them in the air, as we've talked about. But that's if I'm going to have any exposure. Again, Williams with the 5,900 price point, I'm fine. I think that's too expensive. If there's anyone I'm going with from that side, it's going to be him.
All right. So our buddy Mimsy checks in. He says, y'all roasted me when I asked if you should start Ross Dwelly last week. That might have been true, but I think it was like Ross Dwelly or Mimsy, if you're still watching this, I'd love to know who the actual other tight end play was, because if it was between like Ross Dwelly and like Darren Waller, then of course you would have gone with Darren Waller, or Greg Olsen, or even Jared Cook had a better matchup last week. Like Ross Dwelly, yes, he ended up coming through, and kudos to you for that play. He said it was between Ross Dwelly and Eric Ebron. All right, should we take ownership of that one, Fensty? Did we screw up that one? All right, there you go. Yeah,
I guess we screwed that one up.
Wait, who were the Colts playing last week? Do you remember off the top of your head?
Give me one.
Because I'm trying to think. I feel like the Colts had a pretty solid match. It wasn't the Thursday night game. Was it Miami?
No, the Thursday night game was this week.
No, the Thursday night game. I'm saying who was last week for the Colts, because I feel like they were in a really good matchup last week, and that's why we felt okay telling them.
And by the way, I'm just going to say this as we're figuring this out right now. I'm just going to say this. I believe I believe T.Y. Hilton was also this game as well, and also Paris Campbell out as well. So last week they were playing Jacksonville.
Yeah, I don't regret telling you to play Ebron. Obviously, Dwelly had himself a really good game, but Jacksonville, you can attack in the running game, you can attack in the passing game. They're just an attackable defense this year. And you're right, with the Colts missing a bunch of players, Eric Ebron's target share was going up. So, all right, Mimsy, we missed on this one, so we'll try and help you out this week. He wants to know whether you go with Josh Allen or Carson Wentz this week. And I actually think that's probably really, really close. I have them ranked basically side by side in some of the projections, Fensty, that I'm looking at. They're right around the same level. I would say that Carson Wentz is probably the higher upside play. If you want that safe floor with Josh Allen, his ability to run, it's probably there. But I think I'd still lean towards Wentz.
I would too. Again, Seattle is not the same defense as we're used to, and all with weather in both of these games. So it's which weather do you want to deal with? We're going to go with Wentz here.
All right, so Mimsy, again, we apologize for Ebron over a guy that nobody had ever heard of until last week. But regardless, thank you for checking in and sending your question.
Apologize for. There's nothing. We're gonna get some things wrong, and it's there are gonna be points. I'm sorry if you thought we clowned you too much, but yes, there are gonna be some points where some of your low end calls are going to be right over our safety measures. I'm not apologizing about that. It's gonna happen.
All right, fair enough. I think that's perfectly reasonable. From Abo21 on Periscope, Fensty, we got about 15 minutes left. So if you guys are watching and you do have some last-minute questions, go ahead and hit us up to make sure that you're able to go ahead and get your questions answered, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Periscope, whether it be on Twitter. We are here for you guys this morning. From Abo21, who do I start?
I'm frustrated now.
He's fired up. From Avo21, who do I start in a non-PPR running back? And he gives us these Avo, from here on out, man, you can't give us 5 different players, because it's still a show. So try and do 2, maybe 3 guys. Who do I start in non-PPR in a running back with? Devin Singletary, Ronald Jones, Bo Scarborough, or Joe Mixon, or Darius Geis, who we could pick up on free agency. All right, so don't worry about Darius Geis. You can move on from him. Ronald Jones is going up against Atlanta. Singletary is up against the Broncos, non-PPR as well. So out of those four guys, Fensty,
between... You mentioned Joe Mixon.
He did mention Joe Mixon. Mixon is actually getting more volume the last 3 weeks than he has all season, but it's against Pittsburgh's defense. That's been fairly consistent against the run all season long.
I mean, the only other one of this group that I can is Singletary, Ben. That's the only other one I'd rather in a non-PPR that I'd rather start if we're Mixon in this.
So we're debating between Singletary and Mixon, you think?
Yes.
I think we are too. I think if it's non-PPR, again, like I just don't know what the role for Singletary is going to be on a week in, week out basis. I know that Mixon, at least at this point, is getting plenty of volume. I think you got to go Mixon here.
Right. It's a low total. I mean, if you're looking at who's in and who's out from this game, age is still shocker. Auden Tate is questionable as well. So that can open up more plays indirectly for Mixon if he doesn't go.
If Cincinnati is going to get their first win of the season at home against the Steelers, who are dealing with some pretty severe injuries this week, Joe Mixon has to be brilliant. I don't anticipate him being brilliant, but I think of all the upside plays amongst those running backs, he's probably the guy that has the most of it. I really think at this point, like that's the way you have to go.
Seeing what he did beforehand, he did hit double figures on DraftKings in week 4. He put up 15 carries, 62 yards, over 4 yards a carry, and also 4 receptions in that game as well. Yeah,
again, none of them are super ideal in non-PPR, but I think in this case, Abo, we're going to go with Joe Mixon. From KC Chief Keef, half-point PPR flex between Cortland Sutton, Jalen Samuels, Devin Singletary, or Kenny Golladay. This is tough, Fensty, because, again, we really like Sutton, but we're worried about the weather implications in that game in Buffalo. I think half-point PPR, it's probably Jalen Samuels against the Bengals, right? I mean, Galladay's got a really good matchup too, but I think Samuels is probably the play and the safest play of all these guys with no James Conner.
Yep, less competition at the position. I like that the best as well.
From AJ on Twitter and Periscope, full-point PPR between Ryan Griffin and Jonnu Smith. I mean, Ryan Griffin's catching touchdowns, Fensty. Like, Ryan Griffin has become, without Chris Herndon, a pretty integral role in this Jets passing game. I think you still got to roll with him.
Right. No, absolutely. And again, I'm wondering if Delaney Walker is going to play or not. It's not confirmed that he is out for this game because that definitely changes everything with that. Chris Herndon is out, so Ryan Griffin.
Hey, by the way, I talked about my buddy Derek, who I shout out frequently on the show. He has checked in on Periscope. He's got a question for us. Do we start the Beard or BDN, Big Dick Nick, going up in that matchup? You got Ryan Fitzpatrick at what? I mean, it's his name. Like that was his God-given name, Big Dick Nick Foles. That's his mama named him Big Dick. I'm gonna call him Big Dick. Foles is at 5,400 this week, up against Tennessee on the road. Or you have Ryan Fitzpatrick. We haven't talked about Ryan Fitzpatrick's matchup this week, especially with Cleveland not having Myles Garrett. I know that their secondary has been better. Denzel Ward is still going to be able to play a halfway decent lockdown role. But, I mean, Devontae Parker's getting a ton of targets in this offense, Fensty. We saw Jakeem Grant be able to break one, I think it was either a week or 2 weeks or so ago. I think if you're looking for really intriguing matchups, low-end price point quarterbacks that both have some upside in games where I think you're going to see some points, I still probably go with Foles, but I'm going to have a tournament lineup with the Beard in it, with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and have it run back on the other side with Odell Beckham.
I mean, I don't hate it as well. That even if he throws picks, it'll still not matter. He'll still throw for a lot of yards. I'm still going with Nick Foles there. Ben, you've really made me into a Jaguars guy for this week. I'm just letting you know, this is all your fault.
Listen, Chris Conley is a big Star Wars dork.
I'm just kidding.
No, but you're not. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, you can do full on. You do a full on Voltron stack and have like Foles and Fournette, and Conley, and then run it back with Derrick Henry on the other side. Just have all your leverage in the late afternoon game. Like let's go nuts. Let's just make things super super absurd. So there you go. You got we got a BDN reference in the show. So there you go. Let's see who else is coming in.
Derek Brown is being a Mandalorian right there. Bounty hunter looking. He's just calling Boba Fett now on.
From Paul on YouTube Live, favorite defensive streamer for the week. That's a really interesting call. You know what? You know what's been interesting, Fensty, is seeing the DFS community really start to rally behind the Cincinnati Bengals from a price point. They're 2,100. They're I think the lowest priced defense. And again, Pittsburgh has Mason Rudolph, who hasn't blown the doors off of anybody. They're dealing with a bunch of injuries. Juju Smith-Schuster is out. You talked about Deontay Johnson in an intriguing matchup. Like, do we dare go with Cincinnati as a possible streaming defense? I think another one you can go to certainly this week is Detroit. They should be available. Atlanta, maybe people haven't picked up on them yet against Tampa Bay. You know that Winston is always due for a couple interceptions. So is there a streaming defense or two that you like this week?
I've been attacking Tampa so much, Ben, and it's been so much fun. I've just been following their schedule because a lot of the times the defense that's playing them is priced down. I mean, I'm looking in daily. I mean, the Falcons are 3,500. They're one of the more expensive defenses. But picking on Tampa is just so much fun. We talk about how much of a roller coaster Jameis is. That's only resulting in more points for us. So why not continue to chase that?
Okay, I think that's perfectly reasonable. And again, Atlanta all of a sudden on a completely different role. They're now at home for the first time during the course of this winning streak. Listen, the Bucs have the number 2 and number 3 wide receiver in fantasy this year on their team. So they're going to score some touchdowns. But again, you can load up on those points with Winston throwing interceptions. He's going to cough up the fumble. He's going to cough up the ball a couple times through some fumbles. So I think Atlanta in this spot is probably ideal. And Detroit, I don't mind as much either. So I think those are a couple streaming defenses you can go with this week. From Fever checking in on YouTube Live, Darius Geis or Sterling Shepard. I don't know whether it is a PPR league or a standard league, Fensty, but assuming it's half-point PPR, if we meet somewhere in the middle, who do you like between those two?
Man, I mean, a lot of me wants to go Geis here. Again, Adrian Peterson, not 100%, but he is going to play. At the same time with Sterling Shepard, I am very intrigued to see how many targets he gets. This really would make a difference if it was standard versus PPR. I'm going to go with Shepard here. A lot originally thought, though.
Okay, I think Shepard is probably the play that I would go with as well. This is from TS. Interesting question between Baker Mayfield or Aaron Rodgers today. It's a tougher matchup for Rodgers. I still like him today, but I think you gotta love the matchup for Baker Mayfield. I wouldn't hesitate about this. I'd go with Baker today.
I would too. Again, he seems to be just putting together a few weeks in a row of good games. So obviously, it's going in with Baker Mayfield. Man, I really want to go with Rodgers again. The part of the problem is the receiving core and just not knowing we can trust outside of that. With Baker Mayfield, I mean, he's starting to find Landry Moore. We've seen Odell Beckham Jr. in a great spot. I'm going to ride Baker today, but I don't love it. Does not make me feel good. But
okay. Yeah, let's go with Baker. And again, like Baker, I could also see Baker just finding a way to just screw things up in the first half of this game. Like just everyone's cash viable quarterback, and all of a sudden Miami's up like 10 to 6 in the first half. Like that's going to just totally tilt me today, especially when Baker gets going. A little too late, maybe some garbage time, or Nick Chubb just ends up getting all the carries, or Kareem Hunt involved. It could happen, but I think Baker should be in a pretty safe spot today. From Casey Chiefkeef on DraftKings, which is the better combo for Tampa Bay Atlanta, Cameron Brate and Julio, or Matt Ryan and Peyton Barber? I think you got to go with Brate and Julio because I'd rather have exposure to the upside of Julio. And Brate is seeing a ton of targets right now from Jameis Winston. Peyton Barber, there's zero excitement to play him at any sort of DFS level, let alone in season long. So I don't want him in my lineup today.
Yep, it's desperation play. Now, even though O.J. Howard is still there, just seeing what happened with that interception where it almost looked like he was behind the back, and that caused him to lose possession of the ball, and you saw how he wasn't targeted after that anymore. So with Brake being targeted as much as he was, there is a rapport with him and Winston. I'm willing to roll with that way with Brake.
All right, one coming in from my good pal Joey, checking in. Golden Tate or Brandon Cooks for playing fantasy today. I don't know what I'm going to get out of Brandon Cooks. I know his numbers have been better, Fensty, at home over the course of this year, but he's been dealing with that concussion. A very inconsistent Jared Goff, very inconsistent Rams offense. At least I know that Golden Tate is seeing a bunch of volume. And yes, it's against Chicago, and the Bears defense isn't terrible, but what are the Bears playing for right now? I'd rather go with Golden Tate, where I know he's going to see volume and consistency in this offense.
Yep, I'm with you there 100%. I mean, again, with Cooks, I'd feel better if I knew if Woods was in or out, so there'd be some open targets. But again, his spot I feel like is safe, unlike Darius Slate when it comes to targets. So again, this is a very big show me week for the Giants offense with Shepard back in that mix. I'm going to go with Golden Tate here.
TS just weighed in and said, I missed your answer. We are taking Baker Mayfield over Aaron Rodgers today. So good luck to you. Hopefully that ends up working out for you. At JPizzleKC on Twitter checks in between Mark Andrews or Darren Waller today. Waller, of course, has the Jets on the road. Mark Andrews is on the road against the Rams on Monday night with Lamar Jackson getting him the football.
I'm going to stick with Mark Andrews here. It's very, very close. I almost feel like you can't go wrong in this situation. These are some of the best matchups that tight ends have for this week, Ben. I'm sticking with Mark Andrews, though, here.
I think I'm still going to lean towards Waller only because I just don't trust the Jets to be able to lock down at that position. I don't know how many guys are going to necessarily spy on Waller, and I think they're starting to use him and trust him a little bit more in the deep part of the field. I like his target share a little bit more, so I'm going to go Waller for me.
You know what? I'm about to switch my answer here. I don't do this too often here. I'm looking at the matchup a little bit more closely. I'm going to switch it up with Waller, too. Again, I've been riding with that there are going to be points in this game. Possible over situation at 45. I'm going to go with Waller. I'm switching sides.
All right, from @Chunning117 on Twitter, DK Metcalf or Marvin Jones. Metcalf, of course, going up against Philadelphia. Marvin Jones is on the road against Washington. I think I want to go Metcalf here, Fensty, even though Philadelphia's secondary is getting a little bit better. But Marvin Jones has a chance to burn, and I mean burn, Washington deep. I know that Stafford is not in. It's Jeff Driscoll instead, but where do you want to go on this one?
I really still want to go with Metcalf here, even though that is going to help Marvin Jones' value so much today. I'm going to stick with Metcalf here, though, Ben.
I think Metcalf is. See, I love the upside for Marvin though. I'll say slight edge to Metcalf. I think you're right on this one. Fensty, I think those are all the questions for today. So before we say goodbye, where can people find you? And give me one guy that you're going to go ahead and build your lineup around today. The one guy that you cannot leave off your roster today.
The one guy, when looking at a guy that I'm paying up for, again, if there's someone that I'm willing to lock down, especially at the receiver, first of all, you can find me at Fensty Sports on Twitter and Instagram as well. Try posting a little bit more on Instagram too. If there's one guy I'm building around, Ben, and you've convinced me of this, I'm going to go Alvin Kamara. Again, if I'm looking for, I've been really chasing running backs all season, and it hasn't worked out well for me. I've been Michael Thomas as well. Always has been a good play. This time, though, I'm going to be spending up on those running backs and going Alvin Kamara against Carolina.
Okay. Kamara is one of those guys that I have a really hard time. I'll say this. If I can't play Kamara, if I have to choose somebody else, I'll go Julio in this matchup. I know that he's had moments where he's let some folks down, and I know that Calvin Ridley is going to be one of those guys, but if you're not going to play Kamara, and again, I think that's a mistake, then make sure Julio is in your lineup. He's always due for one of those just complete and total smash spot games. And he hasn't scored a touchdown since the 22nd of September. I would imagine that will change for this week. Also official, Alshon Jeffrey is out for Philadelphia, so even more reason to like Dallas Goedert this week. Yeah, so Alshon Jeffrey out, so Dallas Goedert's got the little rocket ship going up. I think that's an ideal spot for him, and I think there's going to be some intriguing spots. All right, Fensty. I worked through some of my issues today. That's what the beauty of this show is. We're here for each other. We're here for you guys. So Thanks to all of you for being a part of the show again. Once again, we will announce over the course of this week what our schedule will be since I am traveling back from Chicago to Kansas City for this upcoming week on Sunday. So, for Fensty, I'm Ben. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being with us each and every week. Good luck, and remember to find us on DraftKings if you want to play us. He is at Fensty. I am at Benny Heis. Fensty and I are going to set up a head-to-head between the two of us, and we can have bragging rights for next week. Talk to you guys soon. Be good.